Hello there, it's Tom here, and this is chapter 24 of Gunnerkrigg Court, Residential. And this was a fun chapter for me to work on because it brings in a lot of the other classmates that we haven't seen very much in the comic. And it gives us a chance to see Annie and Kat interacting with them a little bit. The Residential is based on a school trip that I took myself back in year 7 of school. They called it a residential then, and it was just an opportunity to send us all away together somewhere for about a week or so, I think. And this happened shortly after entering the school, and it was billed mainly as just a way for us all to get to know each other a bit better. So while this residential is happening in their second year of the court, I just wanted an excuse to draw a chapter like this, really. And the park itself that Annie and Kat head to is directly based on Sutton Park, which is nearby where I live. But I'll talk a bit about that as and when we come to those sections. But we start off with a page that a lot of people liked, and it's Annie and Renard talking to each other through the ether. And we see that they're a lot more friendly with each other now, and they're beginning to act like real friends. This also lets us know that Renard won't be featuring in this chapter, since Annie and Kat and everyone else are somewhere else, and she's left her blinkerstone behind. But of course we learn that the park itself is actually within the school grounds, even though the kids are taking a train there. And we also see that the weather isn't that great. In fact, when they arrive at Young's Park, as I've called it, all the kids are wearing raincoats, and it's all very foggy and cloudy. And I like this couple, Bob and Marcia. They were pretty fun to write, and they're both kind of light-hearted people. And just a word on the backgrounds here. I was using texture to give the indication of fog in a lot of these. And also, in the far background, we will always see a hint of the buildings in the skyline just beyond the trees. This is just to cement the fact that they are still inside the court, and it is kind of similar to what it's like in Sutton Park. Since the real Sutton Park is a park in the West Midlands, it is essentially surrounded by, residential buildings and things like that, so whenever you're high up enough on a hill, you can always see past the bounds of the park. And I guess that's pretty typical of any urban park, really. And so we see that Eglamour will be joining them for the week, and all the girls are happy except Annie. And some of these backgrounds are directly based on real areas in Sutton Park itself. And in Sutton Park, just like in this park, you do have cows walking around. They're pretty much free range, and they're allowed to go wherever they want. Unfortunately, they are not robot cows like these ones are, and we get to see a little bit more of path here. And so they walk over to where all their tents are, and this is a circle of trees that is in Sutton Park as well. And it's always a nice place to stop by whenever you visit there. We also see that Jack is along for the trip as well. And I wanted Annie to comment on how the park itself is a lot tamer than the forest is, since it's maintained by robots and groundskeepers, and it's basically a public space. So while it is natural, it could hardly be considered a wilderness. We also come across this gravestone, and we find out that the cows, even though they are tasked with keeping all the grass short, they don't clean up around this gravestone, who belongs to Sir Young and his Oryak. A possible little hint as to the fact that the court robots may have an ingrained dislike of Sir Young, thanks to Diego. We also learn that Annie and Kat have met Bob. Unofficially in the past, he was the silhouetted man who appeared in Chapter 6. And we see that he's kind of a nice guy. He doesn't spill the beans as to the fact that Annie was crying when he came across them. But we do learn that those habitat rooms are used to essentially decontaminate specimens from the forest before implantation into this court here, which is what he and his wife Marcia do. And this is where the wooden arm that Robot used to have has been transplanted. So nighttime comes along, and the kids are camping outside while Eglamour is going to go and stay the night at Bob and Marcia's place. And a little hint here, we can see that maybe the cows don't like anybody in the protector position of the court. In this scene here, I like the feeling of some of the kids hanging out in their tents, and some of the other kids are trying to start a fire and get things going, since they're outside in the cold, left alone with each other. Unfortunately, the cows are there to keep an eye on the kids, and since you don't want kids playing around with dangerous fire, they keep stopping it. So Annie walks out, she summons her blinkerstone and generates a fire that, while it warms everybody up, the heat source is undetectable to the cows, so they are unable to extinguish it. And even though everyone is saying thanks and they're impressed, Annie just says, okay, and walks off. So the next morning, Annie realises that her blinkerstone was not where she left it, which is not a big deal because you can never lose a blinkerstone. Annie will always be able to focus onto it. And when she does here, she realises that Jack actually has it. But as she's peering at him, we see that Jack realises that somebody is watching him. And for the first time, we get an indication that there is something weird going on with him. Here we can see a white spider that is only visible through the ether. And so after that little interlude, we get some more fun character interactions. I like drawing little scenes with Winsbury and Janet because at this stage they are still hiding their relationship from everyone, and it was a way to show that they're both pretty proficient with a bow and arrow, but Janet is clearly the far superior and able to hit Winsbury's arrow out of midair, and it's a kind of way that they tease each other publicly. But then suddenly, lo and behold, Eglamour is called away because something has happened, and Marcia's left to look after the kids. And I think it's funny that Marcia basically dislikes the kids. She doesn't like looking after them. And for some reason, Marcia flips out that somebody shot an arrow into the tree, and punishes the kids by making them all return to their tents and asking Janet to clear all the equipment away. But later on, as the evening sets in, we realise that Janet has not come back, and Marcia is less than willing to help anybody out. I kind of like these early evening scenes because it really brings out the city skyline of the court in the background, making it a lot more looming and oppressive, despite them being in a very green place. As the night sets in, everything turns a shade of blue, and we can really see that they are still surrounded by the court at all times. And drawing the laser cows is good fun. While a lot of the court robots are pretty simplistic in design, I do love drawing the more complex design ones like the laser cows or the Model H's. It's fun to just look up anatomy for an animal and try and imagine how certain parts might be translated over to a robotic form. And clearly the designs that I've drawn would never be feasible in real life, but aesthetically I think it makes them look quite interesting and very fun to draw. I like that the cows are kind of intimidating looking with their sort of skull-shaped faces and round red eyes, but they've shown to be fairly friendly and quite witty at times. And this little scene here shows us that Kat is pretty defensive of Annie when it seems like Jack is making a dig at her social skills. And this shows a large part of Kat's character. She always gets very defensive and angry on her friend's behalf if she feels that somebody is slighting one of her friends. And that's one of her more overt character traits. She's very aggressively loyal to somebody that she considers a friend. But unfortunately, Jack might have had a point. Annie isn't exactly a social butterfly, and even when the kids come again to ask if she could make a fire, John seems to find it difficult to talk to her. And Annie knows that the other kids seem to be nervous around her, which is largely because she's pretty quiet and solitary. But this scene is just a way of showing that she's realizing that it might be affecting Kat as well. Since Kat is so loyal, she's always going to be by Annie's side, even if it means being away from anybody else and not interacting. So Annie makes the decision that she should at least put more of an effort in for Kat's sake, and so they actually go and hang out with their friends. And here, John is playing a traveller guitar, like my dad has. And during the night, Beth goes back to her tent to get a chocolate bar and ends up disappearing. And it turns out that some of the other kids are disappearing too. And the kids are quick to assume that it's just the teachers trying to make the trip more interesting for them. And so they devise a plan whereby Kat is left on her own to see if she'll be taken away. And indeed she is, but not by who they thought. But still the kids go ahead with their plan to entrap the adults, and the rest of the sequence is them calling the adults out on their behaviour and tricking them. Since they know that Marcia's pretty sensitive about her trees, it looks like there's a giant forest fire which draws all the adults out. But since we've already learned that Annie is able to control fire and the temperature of it, we see that she's just sitting here amidst all the flames. It turns out that Marcia is a dryad, a creature that is able to move through trees and is some sort of tree hybrid creature themselves. And one of the reasons that I liked writing and drawing the couple, Bob and Marcia, is that he's just a normal human married to essentially a mythical creature, and they spend their days living and working in this nature reserve in the middle of the court together. And I guess this residential spook fest where they kidnap the kids and stuff is just a ritual they do every year. This time round they get called on it, since they pick on a group of kids that Annie and Kat are part of. But not only that, Jack is also part of the group, and we've seen him helping the cows earlier, and he's taught the cows to make a big laser shield around Bob and Marcia's house. And yes, I understand that lasers don't really bend in this way, but it is a comic about robot cows. And the end. And this bonus page is just a quick, simple way to show that Annie and Renard are getting a bit closer. They're opening up a little bit more with each other. And that's it for Residential. Come back again for Chapter 25, Skywatcher and the Angel.